What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas back again live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel. Bring you another edition of the Thomas Take, as well as another Buffalo Bills edition of the Thomas Take. And I tried to go live with these boys on the My Fantasy podcast. It did not go well in terms of the connection. And I apologize for that to those guys, Dan Shaw, Brandon Reed. My apologies, homies. Could not get on. Couldn't get on for the life of me. I want to bring you guys the best sports news, the best sports takes that I can possibly bring. Woo! We got him. Samuel White, what's going on, my man?
Ryan Thomas, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Well, I hate to catch you off guard, but I'm on live on YouTube right now.
Awesome.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about Richie Incognito. What are your thoughts on the entire situation? Obviously, there's some new news in regards to Richie that I don't know if you heard about it yet, but he was working out at a gym in Florida and threw a dumbbell at one of the workers. Did you hear about this?
Oh, my gosh. No, I did not.
So days after the Bills let him go off the retired reserves list, a day after this happens, it's kind of like, whew, that was a close one.
Yeah, I guess I almost have to say I might have to change my leaning a little bit towards what had transpired. Initially, I can say that when it was that whole Twitter thing a couple months ago, where he was retired, then unhired, and he was firing an agent, and then he was his own agent, and then it's like, I don't know what else I'm doing. LaShawn McCoy offering him money. Like, at that point in time, I was like, oh, man, he's just enjoying things. You know, he's enjoying Buffalo, and I thought that either he was going to retire or he was just goofing around. He'd be back, right?
Right.
You know, fast forward to, the Bills actually saying, hey, as far as we know, he's retired, and then fast forward to, 2 days ago when they finally let him go. I felt a little bit upset at that point in time because I was like, yeah, he might actually go on to another team and have some fun, and maybe there was some rumblings underneath with him and the coach and the GM, and they just couldn't make things work, salary-wise, but with this new information, I feel like maybe they knew something. Maybe they were getting the vibe from him,
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think thus far, at least, these guys aren't idiots. They understand like human personalities and locker room ethics and things like that. They've brought in some high character guys, even Zay Jones included. I would throw in that, despite his slip up there, but. Richie Incognito, it's almost like the fans right now, and a lot of the stuff that I've seen on Facebook, Twitter, people were kind of panicking at the thought of him not being on the team. My thing was, and I did my take on it a little bit ago, but my thing was that this was due to happen anyway, just in terms of football business, where he only had 1 year left on his deal for this year, and then after that, he would have been gone. So it's a little bit perplexing that some Bills fans are so in grief almost that Richie Incognito is not on the team. And I thought he was 32. He's 34, and he turns 35 on July 5th. So as of this season, he would have been 35. That's pushing it for a football player. So I'm almost relieved that he's not on the team.
Yeah. And I think it puts things into perspective because, originally when I saw the whole Twitter back and forth, I honestly was kind of gut laughing, going, oh, man, he's just having a good time, We just got through the drought, and he was a good portion of that. Maybe he's just kind of kicking it and blowing off some steam. But I thought it was so I thought the craziness of the whole thing was so over the top. It had to just be fun, you know?
Right.
and then events start to transpire. I honestly have not read any of the stories about it because I was on jobs all today. But obviously, with that unfolding, there was something there. Maybe he just wasn't. Maybe he wasn't in a good place mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that stinks. I don't mind the fact that he's gone. I think he probably could have played at an above average level this year, barring injuries, which are fairly simple to occur when you're 34, 35 years old.
Right.
But I don't know if I would have wanted him as one of those, hey, we're going to keep you on because we know you're going to be a leader to the next guy who will be taking your spot. There's some dignity and honor in being able to be that older voice, that trains up the young guys. And I don't think they saw that in him.
No, I don't either. And it's almost like they saw like his old habits wouldn't die hard. They say old habits die hard. It's like his old habits would not die at all. And I don't want to poke. Yeah, I don't want to poke the bear. Obviously he has some lapses in judgment every once in a while throughout his career that I feel for the guy. Obviously he needs to seek some sort of medical treatment for something like that. And people make mistakes and stuff right. Yeah. People make mistakes and stuff, but I mean, he's a grown, fully grown man that whipped a dumbbell at somebody, like you can't just do that. And I mean, if he had any shot, which he did have a shot at getting signed by another team, it might be out the window now.
Oh yeah. Given his past record, I mean, that's like, not to beat another dead horse, but that's like Mike Vick.
Right.
When he came back to the NFL, love it or hate it, and that's an argument for another day. When he came back, he had one chance.
Mm-hmm.
So
he made the most of it too.
If he would have done anything wrong, and I think even beyond just ill treatment to animals, if he had done anything that was questionable, like an anger-related thing or something that seems really suspicious or underhanded, I think that he would have lost any of that credibility that he built up within the NFL and never would have been given those secondary options.
Right.
And then you add in for incognito, he has the age going along with it, but then he also just enhanced things by that whole Twitter drama, and then to cap that off, to have an incident that could easily be likened back to the bullying type incident, one way or another. And you just took away your collateral. If you're 34, you got to look and play the part of a 34-year-old, mature, ready to help out the young guys type player, and contribute to the team in one form or another. He's shaping up to look like a distraction. And what team in the massive world of teams rebuilding and going for their push into the next generation really want a distraction on their team who's not at least going to be able to put up big numbers for them,
Right. Yeah, and it's almost like he knowingly knew that the Bills were going to let him go. I mean, it was only a matter of time. I thought it was only a matter of time before they let him go. And it's like the first thing that I'd try to do, given that I literally barked my way out of town, would be to try to kind of essentially be fake and put out a false image so that way I can get signed to a team. You know what I mean? Like, and I mean, some people don't believe that Johnny Manziel even is fully authentic right now, but he auditioned and he got the role.
Yeah.
It's like whether it's in the CFL or not.
Right.
As far as like players that that the Bills have that you like based on high character, or guys that you consider high character guys. I know there might take there's a lot of guys that I think on the team right now are high character guys. Who would you see as that guy that if you were in the locker room, you could be like, hey, he seems like a stand-up guy?
Well, we had Kyle Williams and Wood, and both I think were pillars.
Right.
I'm intrigued. You mentioned before Zay Jones, and I think this could spur on a whole lot of feedback for you. So I'm glad I'm not the one with the podcast. But I enjoy some of the things that he has said. He seems to be a young guy with, prior to the incident and post the incident, with a head on his shoulders, and is looking to rebound from a bad year. I don't know if I necessarily would consider him the voice of reason,
right,
within the locker room. But I think he would definitely be somebody who gives a spark to
right.
the team. I think Josh Allen, yeah. I think he stand up. Everything he does, his response to oh my goodness, Ramsey.
Right. I didn't actually see that. I didn't see that.
I forget verbatim what he said, but it was a very he didn't buy into the hype. It's almost like I'm focused on me. I got a game. I got games to play. I got a job to do. And I love that.
Right.
I want people like that. I love people who can get the locker room agitated and yada yada yada. But I really think that people who can handle themselves like that are great. And then back to Zay Jones for one more second.
Sure.
And I've said this on some of the other shows, and I've said this a million times to you personally. I'm a person about personalities. And Zay Jones has two things that are now in his back pocket that I think someone like him is burning to break away from. He has his beginning of his rookie year, which was subpar, and even when he finished off, even though there were some moments, I think all in all, it wasn't the best performance that he wanted to put forward. And then he has his incident. I have sympathy. I have empathy for him because I know how going through those things can be. I don't knock him for that. I actually think that if he handles it correctly, that things like that are going to be what builds character, and that's the kind of character that once it's built, you can't knock it down. He won't be chucking a weight at somebody at the age 34. I promise you that.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. That once he reaches that high level in terms of his character, that there'd be no chipping him down. I mean, he really. I mean, he made a little bit of a, to say the least, it was a slip up. It wasn't a good image. It wasn't good for him. Wasn't good for anybody. But I think he's a young guy that has a lot of potential. And sometimes in sports, that could be the best thing. And sometimes in sports, that could be the worst thing, depending on who he communicates with, who he surrounds himself with.
Yeah.
How many girlfriends does he have? I mean, he's a decent looking guy, to throw that out there. I'm sure, he enjoys himself, as he should. He's a young guy that is playing a game where he could easily at any point could get tackled the wrong way and his whole life could change. I think that's something that people don't really realize, is that they do get paid quite a lot, but they could also die while playing. Or at the very least, the worst the worst injury outside of death is complete paralysis while playing football. So I mean, that's a tough game. As far as I know you didn't see the Richie stuff, but there's also some Buffalo Bills news out there that I really gravitated to, just because I'm really into like the marketing and the business stuff and all that, as are you. Kim Pegula actually did an interview today with ESPN, and they talked to her about the future plans for the Buffalo Bills stadium and what the Bills are going to do with the stadium and what is out there, what's the possibilities. And she was very doubtful about the possibility of the Bills getting a new stadium anytime soon, stating that she doesn't know if the state will fund it. She doesn't think the county will fund it. They put $130 million into renovating the stadium around 2014, actually. What is your take on that? Where do you see that going potentially?
Well, I think that was kind of the comments that were made. I want to say the comments that I read were a year or 2 years ago. It wasn't from an official within the Bills, but it was someone within the community with ties towards the Bills.
Right.
And I almost echoed the same comments that Kim echoed, is that they just put a lot of money into it. There's places and possibilities, but if it's something that could transpire, it's years down the road. It's not something that they're going to be considering right away. So I think, maybe when we roll around to, 2028, 2030, might we be talking about the Bill Stadium being downtown or something like that? That may be very possible. I don't think it's going to happen, anytime within the next, 4 to 7 years. I just don't see it happening.
I don't either. And I say that almost sadly, and I don't want to, be Debbie Downer about it / Jerry Sullivan, but I would
do your best Jerry impersonation.
I will do my best Jerry Sullivan, Mike Schopp, Bulldog, whatever the hell his name is. They call him Bulldog. I don't even know his real name. I'll do my best impersonation of that. So let's see here. So I'd say something to the effect of, it's complete BS that they can't get a new stadium together due to the fact that the team makes so much money, and that's what they would say. That's what they would say. What I'm gonna say is that they did just put $130 million in the stadium 4 years ago, and I'd be the first to say I don't go to a lot of Bills games due to the fact that the fans are crazy, and that the fans are crazy. I don't like to go to many Bills games, but I did go to Bills games more back then in 2013, 2012, 2013, 2014, and there was a huge difference between the stadium in, let's just say, 2013 and 2014. In a calendar year, they made a lot of improvements. They had a lot of concessions that were local businesses like Lenova and Bison Dip and stuff like that I thought was pretty cool. It was like one huge, community stadium, really. It had all the local, feel to it. And there's not many stadiums like that in the NFL anymore, where you can go to a game and tailgate for the better part of your morning and then go into the game and enjoy it and get, local food and things like that. Those don't really exist anymore. So the bad is, the stadium's over 40 years old. They built it when shortly after they drafted O.J. Simpson, and it does need more work than $130 million, I think. But if they move it and they build a new stadium, which the taxpayers will pay for, essentially, that they're not willing to pay for, where is it going to be? Number one, is it going to be open or is it going to be a dome? How many seats is it going to have? Because Buffalo could honestly, at one point, they could pack 80,000. They cut some seats out. I remember reading in like 1995 or, shortly after Kelly retired, they actually added more box seats and cut out some of the stands. I can't remember what the exact number it was over 80,000 at one point during like the quote unquote heyday. But my thing is, if they built a new stadium and it was a dome, there'd be more opportunity for the city to hold more events. Maybe a college bowl game, maybe a Super Bowl, dare I say it, maybe a more concerts with massive bands. There's just a lot that they could do that would be pretty fun. But I just don't see, like you said, 4 to 7 years. I think that's a safe bet that we might not see a new stadium until then.
Yeah. And here's my thought process on it. And not all of this is knowledge that I've gained necessarily from a person, but it's multiple sources, just listening to the tick of the city, looking at some of the things Terry and Kim have done, with the Sabre organization. Sabres is they're in a rebuild currently. They've made a fantastic, a little village, if you will, around their arena there, and it's hopping and it's drawing people in. I think that already existed prior to Terry and Tim coming here, so they just built a little bit on that. The difference with the football stadium being moved is that it's being uprooted, constructed. All these jobs are being taken care of around it, rerouting traffic, and just the amount of work that will be done is going to be insane. Which I don't think is a problem. It's not like we don't have the workforce. It's not like we wouldn't be able to find the money between funding and Kim and Terry and taxpayers' money. I don't think dollars and cents is 100% what it's about. What I think it boils down to is the fact that I believe that they want to have it downtown. I think that they want to have a hub for what is Buffalo from a sports standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason why they're dragging, now again, not all of this is fact, some of it is my opinion in it, but I think part of the reason why they're dragging is because there's so much rigmarole with the properties and development, which is actually starting to take an uptick currently in the downtown Buffalo area. You see a lot of people turning properties into businesses and lodging and things like that. I believe that is a foretelling of what is heading there. People are getting it ready for this to be a big, quote-unquote, city. Maybe not a New York City, but a destination where people will go. They'll get a hotel for a weekend. They'll catch some games, whether it's Bills game,
Sabres game on Friday, Bills game on Sunday. Yeah, I'm all for that.
Some events all during the year. I think that's what the real cause is for, because $130 or whatever $1 million, while it sounds like a huge amount, it's not a barrier for a team to move, because being able to expand the attendance there, be able to generate dollars and cents with some real big hotels, in the general vicinity, and the Buffalo dining experience. That's all a big deal.
Right.
And I think that amount of revenue will, obviously you're not going to recoup it quickly, but I don't think it's going to be something that's going to make it impossible. I think that we want to make sure we actually have things in order. You don't want to walk people into this revolutionary center without the culture and the buildings that we need to make it awesome. And you don't have them come and spend that money and then say, well, give us another 3 years and this is going to be awesome.
Right.
You see that? See those acres of dirt right there? That's going to be a hotel. It's going to be beautiful, I tell you. You did it as complete as possible so that people will walk in and they'll go, have you been to Buffalo? Have you been to that one Buffalo town in the middle of Buffalo? It's awesome. You can do this, you can do that. I think that's what's happening.
Right. There's a lot of new stuff, too, that the NFL has instituted that I don't know. There's just some cities, like all that you said, it triggered a response in my mind. Like Buffalo could be like a Cleveland. Buffalo could be like a Pittsburgh. Buffalo could be like a Philly or a Detroit, where you have, the cities have MLB teams. Buffalo doesn't, which I've always thought that they should, but that's another point for another day. Whatever. Maybe that's just me being a biased baseball fan, but I thought that it could have happened. It should have happened. But sidebar there. What's that?
It may at some point.
It might. And that could potentially open a door to that, because the MLB is looking to expand and all that. But there's a lot of new stuff going on at these new stadiums. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on was the PSL, or a personal seat license. is a paid license that entitles the holder to the right to buy season tickets for a certain seat in a stadium. The holder can sell the seat license to someone else if they no longer wish to purchase season tickets. So it's something beyond the season ticket. That season ticket, you buy a section that's available. You pick a section, and then however that works. But this is like an upgraded season ticket that they are expensive in these new stadiums, obviously, as they should be, because the facilities are new, the stadium's new, everything's new. They're going to charge top dollar for that.
Right.
That I don't know Buffalo is ready for that. And it's almost like, what was that?
That sounds like a huge jump for Buffalo.
Right. And not only that, it's like the trade-off is this. The trade-off is create your own, as you said, hub in downtown Buffalo of KeyBank Center, Coca-Cola Field, Bill Stadium in downtown Buffalo, or I should say, have all that, have that hub, and lose your current experience of Orchard Park, which, might I add, Orchard Park is a pretty ritzy town that is willing to pay for a new stadium. So my thought has always been, I'd love to have the downtown Buffalo feel, but it would take a long time to tear down some of the stuff down there to put a stadium. I don't even know where it would. I know where they think they'd like to put it, but there's just so much clutter and old buildings that need to go that it would take years for that stuff to get done, 3-4 years at least. Where if Bill's,
it falls within my time parameter.
It does for sure, and I would love it. I'd love it just as much as anybody. Trust me on that. But you'd lose the tailgate allure. You know what I mean? You lose the. I don't know. I almost think that if they want a new stadium and you have a city in a region that's willing to fund it, you tear down the old one and just build a new one right next to it.
Did Orchard Park say that they guarantee that there's going to be tailgating and et cetera, that they wouldn't introduce the new pricing points?
Well, that's something that the taxpayers are saying. Like, if we're gonna, if you guys decided to keep the stadium in Orchard Park, we'd want a new stadium, but we would want all the other entities surrounding it, which is what happened really in Pittsburgh and Cleveland. They still have that tailgating experience at Heinz Field and Lincoln Financial and the Brown Stadium. They still have that because they built it relatively in the same area. Where if Buffalo moved their stadium to downtown, they could still do tailgating. I'm not saying they couldn't, but there'd be a lot more red tape to cut through, to put it, which I hope they do. I hope that if it does happen, like you said, within 4 to 7 years, that it is in downtown Buffalo, because it does need that quote unquote kick in the teeth. I really think the Canal side is great. I think KeyBank is great. I do think there needs to be some renovations to KeyBank Center too.
And I think that's down the pipeline too.
Right.
But I mean, I don't mind if it were in Orchard Park. I think having something that's sort of like home. It's where it's supposed to be. But I think the same hurdles. Obviously, the hurdles of doing it in Orchard Park would probably be easier to cross than hurdles of doing it downtown. Just from a logistics standpoint. But in the end, I think that they're going to, make the right choice based on all the factors involved. And I don't think we'll ever know enough to be able to really dictate what would make the most sense. But one of the things I keep telling myself I have to remember, when we're looking at these other stadiums and other markets, and we're going, well, why can't Buffalo do this so we can be like this? And we have to realize, realistically, there's going to have to be some trade-offs. And that's a common theme in this Western New York area. We want, but then we don't want to give what the other places gave in order to get those things.
Right.
If be the top in technology and allure, bring in some of these businesses, there's things you have to do. You can't be a throwback old school town and also be the budding hub of technology. It's just not how it works.
And that's a good point.
You got to balance.
That's a good point because, like, Green Bay, I don't know the full details on it, but technically the fans own the team. Like, the county in Green Bay owns the team. I don't know how all that works, but I found that to be pretty.
They were trying to do that with the Bills.
Right.
They were attempting to before.
Yeah, they were trying to do that with the Bills. I'm reading the exact quote that she said. She said, says Bills owner Kim Pegula expressed doubt at the NFL owners meetings this week about the team's ability to build a new stadium to replace New Era Field. She said, quote, I don't even know if we can get there. I know fans in Buffalo don't want higher ticket prices. They don't want PSLs, personal seat licenses, as I touched on earlier. And the state of New York doesn't want to give you any money. The city doesn't. We don't have $1.5 billion sitting around. We used it to buy the team, which to me, it's like when she said we don't have $1.5 billion sitting around, we used it to buy the team. They literally did use it to buy the team. Like she's not even over exaggerating with that.
No joke about it. Yeah.
Right. So it's like we wanted them saved. They got saved. They're still here. I think the New Era Field it's doable. It's not the best stadium on earth, but it's our stadium and fans go. Season tickets are 58,000 out of a 75,000 seat stadium, which is insane when you really look at that. That way more than half the stadium seating capacity is season ticket holders. So it's kind of like it's a part of the niche in this area, and the fact that it's in Orchard Park, it's kind of like a central destination between all the other suburbs in Western New York. So I don't really hate it. It's just that when I do go to a game, I notice things that are like glaring about the stadium, like lighting and things like that, you know, they put a lot of money into that, but really it was a drop in the bucket in terms of NFL stadium dollars and cents, if you will.
Yeah, I was down in Miami, and this was, I don't know, maybe 7 or 10 years ago, and I saw their stadium. It was just a glowing beacon, and I'm driving down the highway, and I was like, what is that?
Right.
You know? So it's like, we know that I think that we're good with what we have, and I don't think anybody's ever going to question that. But I think, you know, the long story short is if we want to move into the area where I think we want to move into, there's going to have to be some compromise. But I think that Buffalo is sensible enough to keep its core intact. I think Kim bringing that up at the meeting the way that she did, she's taking the fans' feelings into consideration, because when you're at an owners meeting, you don't have to necessarily say, well, the fans aren't going to blah, blah, blah. Hey, if you get a hug that's going to bring people in, from a business standpoint, I don't care what country that person came from, you know, that's much. But Buffalo, Western New York standpoint, I want someone from Buffalo. I want that blue collar guy from over here who's going to act like where his construction hat painted in the Buffalo, you know, blue and red. So I think that we're going to have to balance both of that. If we have a large enough stadium, we may be able to have the best of both worlds, you know, and still be profitable and expand our imprint on the NFL.
One of the things that I really looked at when I first heard this article was just at the other stadiums, and I found a list of the other stadiums, oldest to newest. The oldest stadium currently in the NFL is the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum for the LA Rams, which is only temporary. They're only going to have that for maybe another year, and then they move into their new ritzy stadium. Soldier Field in Chicago, the Bears Stadium, is a national landmark. I don't see Chicago getting a new stadium anytime soon, and they've renovated that. They preserved it. Lambeau Field, the same thing, opened in 1957. The Oakland Alameda County Coliseum for the Raiders, they're moving out of that to Las Vegas next year. Arrowhead in Kansas City is another staple in Kansas City, national landmark. And then next is us. So it's like, of all those stadiums, it literally is almost the fact that I wouldn't say our stadium's the worst, but I definitely wouldn't say it's among Arrowhead or Lambeau or Soldier Field.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I hope you think 4 to 7 years.
I think that if it were to happen, you wouldn't really see any planning done till 4 or 7 years. I just don't. I don't think it's that close. Things in Western Europe move slow.
Right.
You know? I wouldn't be surprised if we're walking around in walkers talking about this 40 years from now. It would not surprise me.
And they made a big deal about how the stadium's newly renovated in 2014 with 2 new HD video boards, a new LED sponsor board are visible on the tunnel end of the stadium. It's like teams have had those for decades. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, I don't know. I hope they do build something new at some point, but we'll see. See what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be cool either way. I mean, no one's gonna be mad if we stick around where we are.
Right.
We got disadvantages, but heck, it's home. So.
Right. Yeah, and I looked it up just to be sure. In '72, when it first opened, from '72 to 1998. It had 80,000 seats, and then it went from 75,000 in 2000 to 71,000 today. So
that's crazy.
They added more suites and stuff to try to make it as current as they could, and it's like, they've had outdoor concerts there. I think Beyonce and Jay-Z are coming this August. They're coming. So I mean, people will show up for that for sure, but.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Well, thanks for joining me, dude. I really appreciate it. That was our thoughts, meaning me and Sir Samuel White, on all things Buffalo Bills. Richie Incognito, the Bills Stadium talks, Kim Pegula's statements on that today with Mike Rodak of ESPN.com. Thanks for joining me, Samuel.
Absolutely, bud.
Take care, dude.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. So Samuel joined me on the show. It's always a pleasure having him on the show. We had a lot of great talking points in terms of the Buffalo Bills Stadium, all that stuff. I frankly have wanted a new stadium for quite a long time. My first Buffalo Bills game experience, I was 9 years old. Not a place to take a 9-year-old. Saw things that my mind will never unsee. But sidebar, I do think that the new stadium is coming. But as Samuel said, I agree with his timeline of that. You really won't start to see chatter on that until about 4 to 7 years from now. And that's okay. It is a staple. It is home, New Era Field. But I do think that discussions do need to start within the next 3 to 4 years. Take care, everybody. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take. Let's go Buffalo. Bills make me want to shout. Let's get them stadium talks started within the next 3 years. It's my best case scenario.